Right now, we're going to welcome Joe Oltmann. He hosts Untamed Podcasts, which challenges the constraints of conventional narratives and brings unfiltered truth daily. Joe has been heavily involved in the fight for election integrity, we like that, demanding accountability and protecting our communities. He is an unapologetic Christian, the best kind, conservative who lives biblical principles through philanthropy and service to the most vulnerable among us. Joe believes that courage is more infectious than fear. Please welcome Joe Oltmann back to Freedom Fest.
How you guys doing? It's been a long day. So, I am a domestic terrorist. I just want you guys to know that right-wing extremism is really bad. And yeah, none of that's true. I want to talk to you a little bit about what I learned walking around here first. I got to talk to the people over at Turning Point USA, both the college chapter and the high school chapter. And here's what I learned. I said, how well are things going for you at Turning Point USA? And they said, great. We had hundreds of people sign up after Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And it hit me at that moment that it took Charlie Kirk being assassinated for people to step up and to join Turning Point USA. And then I asked, how's it going on the college campuses? And they said, well, we're getting death threats nearly every day. So then I asked Lakey, she volunteered before and now she does the high school Turning Point USA. And she said, it's good, we have some new chapters. And then we went into the high school and we set up and we went to get started and then they kicked us out. And I guess what I learned from talking to people here is that you live in a fairly conservative state, correct? I mean, you have a conservative governor. Yeah, okay, you have a half conservative governor? Okay, so that's the problem, is that you have election systems that literally allow for what's called incrementalism. Incrementalism is the thing where we have incrementally allowed them to kill off people in our community. And it's not just, by the way, Charlie Kirk. We have to look at the fact that Tina Peters went in, gathered information in Colorado, and said, hey, I want to just show you that they stole the elections and that these machines are not valid. That they basically have committed crimes against the community. And what did they do to her? They arrested her. And they sentenced her to jail for 9.5 years for uncovering the fraud in Dominion voting systems. Now, I would normally say to you, well, she committed a crime and so she should have to pay for it, right? That's what the people said, is that, oh, she actually committed a crime by uncovering the things that were happening in the election. What crime? So here's the reality. Tina Peters was not charged with any crime associated with the work that she did to uncover the election fraud in Mesa County, Colorado. Not one crime was she charged with. Actually, they went out, much like they did with the J6ers, and they created novel case law. They used things that they had never charged anybody with, and they charged Tina Peters with it. And then they maxed out the sentence on every single charge. And then the judge went in and said, we're not going to allow any of the evidence related to the election fraud into the courtroom. And so you have no ability to talk about the election fraud that happened. And every time that Tina brought it up, they said, no, you're not allowed to talk about that. And so she had to fight with both hands tied behind her back, wasn't allowed to bring up the evidence related to why she even went in to look at the machines to begin with. And then the jury convicted her of influencing a public official. 3.5 years. Using someone else's badge, 4.5 years. But Tina went to the IT department first and said, hey, we need you guys to make a copy of the machines. We think there's some bad stuff happening. And what do you think the IT department at the county said? Yeah, no, we're not going to do it. We don't have time to do it. You know, I talk a lot about Tina and I talk about our election machines, and if you watch my podcast, all I talk about at the beginning, the middle, and the end is the fact that we don't have free and fair elections. I talk about the fact that you cannot have a black box that decides the fate of America and expect that you're not going to have a degraded society. By the way, I want to say thank you to the law enforcement that's here because, by the way, they've kept you safe all day. So how do we work the problem? Last night I had a conversation with someone that ran one of your conservative groups. And he's like, well, you know, we're making progress, And so incrementally over the last 20 years, they've taken our communities. I'm going to tell you how the election fraud happened, then I'm going to tell you what we can do to take it back. So over the last 20 years, it was 2004, Clint Curtis testified in Congress. He goes, this Chinese company that I worked for and this sitting congressman, who's a Republican in Florida, asked me to build a voting machine that would not be able to detect that there was any fraud, that we could put in 20 votes and out would come 20 for a different candidate. Now that same year was the same year that they had the Venezuelan election with Hugo Chavez. It was highly contested. Now just that year, Smartmatic was given over $120 million to run those elections using those same machines, 2004. Remember the Chinese company down in Florida? Well, that software, that system, found its way down to this company called Smartmatic. And you'd say, Joe, how do you know that? Because I'm clairvoyant. No. Here's how I know it. Smartmatic was first actually in the United States, created in guess what state? Florida. Okay? Smartmatic was in Florida, Smartmatic was down in Venezuela, had a $120 million windfall. They came to the United States and they said, you know what, we want to buy an election system in the United States. Let's just start buying elections here. Let's start cheating in elections in the United States. In March of 2005, Smartmatic, that just cheated in an election in Venezuela, came to the United States and bought Sequoia voting systems. 17 states in the District of Columbia was swallowed up by a foreign entity that just happened to open up a company in Florida. A month later, there was a man that was asked to join Sequoia. Now he says, by his own words, that he got a cold call from Sequoia that says, hey, we need a chief architect. We want you to come work for us. His name is Dr. Eric Coomer. See, the only reason I got involved in any of this because I was on a call with the Antifa, and Eric Coomer was on the call, and he said, hey, look, don't worry about it. Trump's not going to win. I made sure of it. That was just a few months before the November election in 2020. Now, prior to that, all I cared about was making sure that our community was open and that we actually didn't put ourselves in a position where we allowed the government to shut us down and say it's only safe at Walmart. Small businesses, they don't know how to take care of themselves, they don't know how to wash their hands. But we can shut them down because we have Walmart. That's the only reason I started the Reopen movement. Do you guys remember the Reopen Colorado? Did you guys have one here? Where they reopened the communities? You didn't have it here? Did you guys ever close? You didn't close. Okay. So that's how I got involved in this. But Eric Coomer was at Sequoia Voting System 1 month after. Why is this important? He was the chief architect of Sequoia. Why is it important that we understand who started it? Eric Coomer, by the way, in 2020, was on a call with Antifa. Why is that important? What did they just declare Antifa to be right now? A terrorist group. But here's what you need to know about Dr. Coomer. He was a heroin addict. He was subject to 2 charges in California for, I think, a DUI on both cases. He was trying to dry out. So while he's actually going through almost spending a large amount of time in prison, Sequoia picks up the phone that runs 17 states in the District of Columbia, run by a company that the only election they've done is out of Venezuela, and says, we want to hire you as our chief architect. Does that check with anybody in this room? Could anybody here be subject to 2 charges, felony charges, and get a job at McDonald's? You got to pass a background check, right? So how stupid are we? But he's the chief architect now at Sequoia Voting Systems. Fast forward 2006. CIFIS was doing, by the way, that's the organization that looks into whether or not there's any sort of national security risk for any critical infrastructure. They had a municipal election. Eric Coomer, by the way, prior to going to work for Sequoia, he did websites for small businesses. So anybody want to get into the election systems, all you have to do is start making websites for small businesses. In 2006, they had a municipal election in Chicago. 24 Venezuelans were flown up from Venezuela to run that election. It was an unmitigatable disaster. The elections in the 17 states going into 2006 were also a disaster. Then CIFIS came in and said, you know what we want you to do? We want you to sell, because we can't have a foreign entity owning our elections. So they were forced to sell in 2007. They said, you must divest from Sequoia from Smartmatic. Did anybody remember any of that, by the way? So what did I just talk about with incrementalism? If you have a stolen election system, if you have the ability to steal elections, how are your judges actually put into office? They're appointed. By the way, you're in a unique place in the state of Tennessee. In Tennessee, your election people are appointed too, aren't they? So, to steal elections, do you have to steal all of them? Can they let President Trump win and steal down ballot? See, this is the part nobody understands, and nobody actually wants to sit through it because it's like paint drying. But it's an important part of how we actually got to where we are right now. State by state, community by community, they stole elections at will. When Sequoia was sold to Dominion Voting Systems in 2010, one of the things that happened, it's written, you can look at all this stuff up, I wrote an entire paper on it. Smartmatic retained all the intellectual property and of the voting system. All of it. Fast forward to other elections outside the country. Remember how I said Eric Coomer was the chief architect? They had massive riots in 2008 in Mongolia. Guess who else was there? In 2010, they had massive riots and they had stolen elections and nobody believed the outcome of those elections in Mongolia. Guess who else was there? Eric Coomer. Fast forward to 2012 in the Philippines. Guess who was doing their elections? Dominion Voting Systems. Who was there? I mean, you guys can go look all of this stuff up. This is the stuff they don't want you to know. This is the stuff that got me canceled. This is why I am very grateful that they're up on the hill with the sniper guys. Fast forward to 2016. Bypass everything done everywhere else. President Trump won the election. Did he win the popular vote? Does anybody know if he won the popular vote in 2016? He did not. He did not win the popular vote. He lost the popular vote by almost 2 million votes. But he won because of our electoral college. And they did not anticipate, they did try to steal it, but they did not anticipate that we would have this much support for President Trump. Now fast forward to 2018, and this is where it all starts to get really, really interesting. What happened in 2017 when President Trump became president? In 2017, when President Trump became president, he got up and he said, I'm going to return the power back to the people. We had the House, we had the Senate, we had the presidency. What do we have right now? We got the House, we got the Senate, we got the presidency. And what has happened in the last 9 months? Anybody got arrested yet? Anybody in jail? What happened in 2018? I'm going to tell you what happened in 2018. We lost the House, we lost the Senate. President Trump was impeached 2 times. See, we forget all the things that we went through during the first presidency. There was roadblock after roadblock after roadblock after roadblock that was put in our way. And guess who it was put in our way by? Was it the Democrats? No, it was the Republicans. Now, some of you would call them rhinos. Some would say they've sold out. But they have. And if you look back to who actually implemented and brought election systems to the United States, it wasn't a Democrat, it was a Republican from Florida. So there's an agenda that we don't get a seat at that table. But when we fast forward to 2020, we saw what happened. Your eyes did not deceive you. They didn't deceive me. We saw as Arizona, 10 minutes into them closing the polls, who was it that called it for Biden in Arizona? Fox. Fox News called it 10 minutes in. We're calling Arizona for Biden. Less than 10% of the districts were in, and they called it for Biden. And guess who was up? Trump. So how are you going to call it for Biden with 10% of the vote in Arizona? What ended up happening in Arizona? You guys remember what happened in Nashville? They blew up a data center. Whose data was there? You don't know that either. So you can start to see that they've controlled the narrative from 2018, 2016, 2014. They incrementally took away your community. They incrementally degraded everything about your community by putting people in positions of power and authority, and that wasn't even the problem. It's not the governors that we have a problem with, or even the senators. It's when you can capture the judiciary that you have a massive problem, because then you have no lever of power by which to get a redress of grievance. And if I'm wrong, in January of 2021, people went to the Capitol for redress of grievance, and they used this thing called the 1512. It's a felony charge that allowed for them to keep people in prison, and they used it over 900 times by right now that year to put some of your family members in prison indefinitely. Now, 1512 was a charge that was created for Enron, for withholding documents. And they said, no, we're going to use it novelly to persecute Americans. And what was the conviction rate of people that showed up and stood on the grass and prayed? What was the conviction rate of those people that were sentenced to an average of 54 months in jail? What was the conviction rate? Someone just walked in. This happened many times, hundreds of times. They sat on the grass and just prayed. 100%. 100% of them were charged with the same 4 misdemeanors and felony counts that resulted in an average sentence of 54 months in prison. In Mesa County, Colorado, I'll use this as a comparison so you understand how rotted the judiciary is and how really bad these judges are, and the fact that these are consequences that you have to incrementalism, to saying, you know, I'm just doing whatever I can. We're taking what they give us. You know, somebody told me today, they said, you know what? People are just not that bright. They're not leaders. And I looked at them and said, I don't even know who you're talking about. That doesn't check with me. In Mesa County, there was 3 men that were arrested. They were arrested for child porn and for sex crimes against children. It was the same courtroom Tina Peters got 9.5 years for. Would you be surprised if their sentence was probation? So you can commit crimes against children and you get probation, but if you uncover election fraud, you go to prison for 9.5 years. Or how about the young girl, 22 years old, where they let him out 39 times? It just happened in, I think, South Carolina, North Carolina. His 22-year-old daughter, he broke in the house. She begged for her life, and he shot her, killed her. 39 times he was arrested, 25 for felonies. Let out on the street to make victims, again, of the public. How about the man that was just let out after only 6 years in prison for stabbing a 6-year-old to death? 8 years in prison. He was just let out for murdering a 6-year-old. How does this happen? How does this happen? How do we live in a lawless society? And is it lawless? Before your very eyes, you see what you know does not deceive you. We saw Charlie Kirk get murdered. And we had people on TV that were celebrating it. How does that happen? How do we get to this place? Incrementalism. The people that actually are pulling all the levers of power across the United States tell us the same thing that they told you, that I've told you, and that is, well, there's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing you can do about it. There's no lever that you can pull that's going to actually give you back your ability to have justice. Well, I don't think that's true. There's 2 things that we have that I know to be true. One, we have Jesus. But see, the church has kind of misrepresented that too. Church says we have to turn the other cheek. And maybe it's not your church. I hope it's not your church. But it says, hey, you have to turn the other cheek. And I would sit and tell you that he also said to what? Trade your cloak for a sword. But that's not convenient. I will tell you that I was really tired. President Trump got into office in November, and I decided I didn't want anything more to do with politics. I tried as hard as I could to run away from it. But for 4 years, I traveled over 200 times speaking and talking about what you can do. And here's the difference. I don't want your money. I don't need it. I don't want power. I don't think half of you even know who I am, so I don't want that. But I do have 2 kids. And I love my country. And I'm just a poor kid from D.C. that grew up super poor, that did really, really well, that said, hey, look, that opportunity should be available to all of us. But it's not. And the thing that I hear everywhere I go is, Joe, we're doing the best we can. There's nothing we can do. We file lawsuits. Well, if you file lawsuits with a judge that's already made a decision that he's not going to do anything for you, what's the outcome of the lawsuit going to be? There's no good outcome. And so I look at the fact that they incrementally took away from us, and then we had this front. We were making progress inside the high schools, inside the universities, in the education environment. And then what did they do? When the progress became too great and thousands of kids would show up, what did they do to us? They killed him. They murdered him. And yet somehow it just feels like when they told us what happened, it just doesn't sit right, does it? Doesn't feel like that's what really happened. So what do? There's only one way to take back our country. One way. And it's a way that every single one of you can be involved in it. Every one of you. And that is, go grab your tiki torches and your pitchforks. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. You have to fight. We cannot have machines. We cannot have mail-in ballots. We must go to one day, make it a federal holiday. We give dead people holidays. Why can't we give the American people a holiday? We shut down the economy for 6 months. Make sure they have an ID. And here they'll say, we can't get enough people to show up, right? Isn't that the big thing? They say, oh, you can't get enough people to show up. Pay every single person that works on elections $100 an hour. How many people here would work for $100 an hour? And you're like, oh, you can't do it, it's too much. Well, wait a minute. You spend $100 million on an election system. We could pay the American people 16 grand to work 3.5 weeks, can't we? Set up for it, day of the voting, count it. Can we pay people $100 an hour? It would remove 100% of special interest and get rid of private equity. The only thing that would create equity would be your pockets. Would it work? Can we go to hand count, paper ballot, in person, no machines, and no mail-in ballots? Can we? Is it possible? Who here wants mail-in ballots? You want mail-in ballots? Sit down. 12 minutes, okay. If you go through time over the last 10 years, has any part of your life gotten better? Any part? Besides your relationship with your wife, which better get better over time. Has any part of your life gotten better? Have taxes gone down? Do you have more money at the end of the week? Is health care less expensive? We've gotten to the place where you're not represented by yourself. You have no representation. They literally could walk in and say, we're going to take another 20% of your paycheck. What are you going to say? No? You didn't call your congressman? The thing that I think you don't understand is that you're like an elephant with a string tied to your leg, tied to a fence that's not even in the ground. And you've got 20 different conservative organizations that were around here. And do those organizations talk to each other? Do they? They do? Yeah, yours do. So we have to go through this thing called consolidation. We've got to get to the point where we allow ourselves to be able to solve the problem, and we have to get on the same page on how we resolve it. Everything comes back to stolen elections. Everything. There's not anything that you could tell me, and I'll be like, it's because of stolen elections. Because all the rules have changed, and all the mechanisms of power have changed as a result of those stolen elections. Healthcare. Obama was elected in 2008. In 2012, the Affordable Care Act passed. Was it affordable? I mean, we sit here and we walk through day after day, week after week, and we go through the same thing over and over again. And when something happens to someone in our community, we're like, oh man, I'm sure glad it's not me being arrested and the FBI breaking down my door. But it should be. We should be asking the question, why are they running? Why do private equity firms own all the election companies? Why? Private equity. What does private equity do? They make money. Why do they own our election systems? And why do the people that get up here to talk to you about, hey, I'm running for office, why do they not say, listen, I'm probably going to lose. I'm going to lose because I'm going to fight for you, and they're not going to want me in office. They're going to want someone else that does exactly what they want me to do. That's who they want in the chair. And if that's not true, why did Carrie Lake not get elected? She's one of the most popular people in not just Arizona, but around the country. And her opponent did not even run a campaign. The only way we get to a place where we have peace is to take the things off the table that don't give it. Everything will reset, by the way, if you get people in positions of power and authority that represent you as people. Everything. Everything will change. How many of you own your house? No, you don't. None of you do. No, you don't. You pay property tax? You don't pay property tax? You're a lucky one. Who pays property tax? Do you own your home? I want you to do me a favor. Stop paying your property tax. See who owns the home. It's a real thing. We have become slaves to an environment. We go to church, we go to work, we come home, we pay our taxes. Now you guys have tollways. How's that working out for you? You guys have tollways now? I thought tollways were coming to Tennessee. They are? All right. So you're about to have tollways. Who gets to use the tollway? Single moms that need to get home fast? Do they get to use the tollways? No. I talk about what we need to do to fix it, which is you guys are going to have to come together and do the same thing we're doing in every other state. Men, you got to start acting like men, first of all. You got to stand together. You got to build a fraternity. You got to show up. It was 90% women out there when I looked around the corner, 90%. Men have an obligation to show up for their family, not just to go make money. We've got to find a way to get to a place where inside of the culture, the ethos of our community, we can take back the levers of power. And the only way you do that is by force. So who here has a pitchfork? Last night when I had the conversation, I was like, listen, incrementalism will not get us anywhere. You cannot tell me about small wins. We got a certain person elected. You have to be willing to go to the mat and take everything that you deserve. In other words, it was never theirs to take to begin with. Or just admit you're a slave and let's move on. Those are your two options. But as I'm sitting there talking to him, and I'm like, listen, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. Every time that you pull off to put new tires on the car because you're going down there and you said, okay, I'm going to root out corruption and pull that person out, another piece of corruption comes in because you have fraudulent elections. You have no representation. You have no idea what an election looks like. You just trusted it. Whatever comes out the end, that's what the people said. But the community's gone to zero and the judiciary's rotted. The legislators just talk about we the people, we the people, we the people. They don't even pay for health care. They give themselves raises. Anybody here want to give themselves a raise? How about a credit card that basically you can go to negative as much as you want? Anybody want one of those? We're $37 trillion in debt. We think it's more important to kill babies and cut off penises than we do to take care of our community and value education. That's the reality. We think it's okay to groom children and to talk about the fact that white people need to be killed. But God forbid we talk about what levers of power have been taken away from the American people. You're not allowed to do it. You're not allowed to be honest. You pay your taxes, you don't own your home. You don't own your car because if you don't pay for your tax, you can't drive it on the street. Everything that you have is owned by the government. And then we expect the police to be the ones to take care of us. Like, this guy just ran into my car, or you need to go find him, go chase him down. And right now, they can't even do their job because go talk to any sort of media company or anyone else, and they're being told that they're bad and kneeling on the backs of every person that they pull over for a traffic ticket. Every part of our community that was great has been taken from us. And so the only way to fix it is by force. So you can make a decision to say, all right, well, we're going to incrementally get to the place we need to get to. And I'm going to tell you right now, you're not going to be able to take anything back until you say, I'm done dealing with this. I'm done with you treating me like a slave. It's really simple. I don't want election law that says, oh, well, now we're going to clean up the voter rolls. Why didn't you clean up the voter rolls for 20 years? I got to pass a law to clean up a voter roll? I mean, think of how stupid that is. Isn't it common sense that you only want people on the voter rolls that are actually citizens? So why can't we have it? Why are we sitting over there walking into town commissioner meetings and they go, you have 2 minutes. What's your name? Slave. Yeah, I'm slave 206-219-2464. Yeah, and I'm here because I'm going to beg you to clean up our voter rolls. 20 years they weren't cleaned up. All of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, we'll pass a law to clean up the voter rolls. Pinky swear that's what we're going to do. Why are we settling for scraps? Everybody says, Joe, you get really pissed off. Yeah, I'm really pissed off. I'm pissed off for your children, my children. And I don't want to go grab a gun, because who are you going to shoot? We don't even know who the enemy is. And so if you're running around trying to figure out who the enemy is, you can't find them. So how do you solve the problem? You start demanding that you actually can see that there's transparency, and not just your elections, but even how judges treat the people in your community. The legislatures, they make sure they come back to your community. At the end of the day, if you don't get rid of machines and you don't get rid of mail-in ballots, we are finished. It's not and I'm sorry, I'm actually really sorry if you're under the age of 30 and I said that to you, because in your mind you're like, man, Joe, you're half dead, but I got a lot of life left in me. We have to do for our children what we should have done 20 years ago. And that's pay attention. We should be paying attention. We should be praying every single day. By the way, there's a favorite Bible verse that I have. It's Galatians 4:16. Am I the enemy because I'm telling you the truth? And the reality of it is, I'm trying to tell you the truth. I'm trying to shake you and say, listen, collectively you can do a lot. Imagine if 300 or 400 of you walked into the election office and said, yeah, you're getting rid of the machines. And they're going to say, no, we're not. They're going to call the police on you. They're going to have you arrested. So just, enjoy the next few days of really bad food in jail. Who's willing to go to jail? Who's willing? Who's a veteran here? Yeah. Were you ready to die for this country? Yeah. What's that? There's been sacrifices made for generations. I'm ready to go to jail. I'm not ready to get violent. I'm not ready to do anything violent. I don't think we have to. Violence isn't necessary. But we do need to demand that they give back to us what was never theirs to take. And if we do so and we maintain who we are as God-fearing people, we will win. God gives you an opportunity to do something, and He's giving it to us right now. And I truly believe that if we don't take advantage of it, we don't get rid of machines, we don't get rid of mail-in ballots, we don't do the things that are necessary to reset the levers of power, our country is finished. So you might get your next paycheck. You might get the paycheck after that. But much like Daniel Pearl, anybody know who Daniel Pearl is? Daniel Pearl was the guy that knelt before a Al-Qaeda terrorist, bad-mouthed America, hoping that that would save his life, and then they reached down and they cut his head off. That's really where we are. We're at a place right now where they're not going to give anything back to us unless we take it. They're not going to stop doing the things that they're doing to our children unless we stop it. They're not going to take down the pride flags until we make them take them down. But now we have our children, like TPUSA, doing the fighting for us. I didn't know what I was going to talk about, and I want to clear something out. Dave said today that I was going to write a book. He's actually told me I need to write a book. And I said two things. One, President Trump and along with us are able to do the things that are necessary to preserve, protect, and restore our country, or we're all going to die. Because everyone here is considered an enemy to this global agenda, which means your children are considered a threat to what they're trying to accomplish. We're at the place where a lie has become the truth and a truth has become a lie. And I'm sorry this is very inconvenient for you, but I'll tell you this. When the police become the enemy, and when you become the enemy, and where being white is now a crime, and grooming children and the new "you're special" is changing genders, that's an upside down world. When they pass laws and tell you that if you misgender someone or call them the wrong pronoun that you can get up to 2 years in prison, that's not normal. And many of you will just let it happen. You'll just, I don't want to get involved. So you have to speak up and say something. What's the organization here? What's the organization here, the conservative organization that everyone belongs to? Is there one? TCGC? Is that it? Okay. So here's the challenge. I have no time left. And you don't want to hear me anymore. Mark's going to get out here and give you some music. Here's what I'll say to you. Incrementalism will end up killing our country, fully. Where we are now is probably the most critical time that we're going to ever have in history. In 2026, I'm going to just repeat what they're going to do, that they were probably going to do anyway. But if we don't get rid of machines and mail-in ballots by the end of the year, I said that this was probably too late. But if we don't get rid of machines and mail-in ballots going into 2026, they're going to steal the House, they're going to steal the Senate, and we'll be right back in the position where they're taking away our ability to make any meaningful change. So at this point, you're going to have to get together, and you're definitely going to have to pray. And thanks for having me out. God bless you all.